Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we have Carol Wynn on the podcast. She is founder of the nonprofit Eagles Wings 2020, which focuses on encouraging others. She is also an abuse survivor, and we brought her to the show today to talk about our stories of betrayal trauma and adultery, but also to talk about how she recovered and healed from this trauma to help encourage others. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Carol. This is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
We've heard a lot about your story and heard God may be leading you to write a book. Do you mind sharing a little of your story and how it led up to adultery?
Yes. My husband and I grew up in church. We met at church, actually, and married at 17 and 18 years old. I had my girls at 19 and 22, and we served in the church for many years in many ways. On the surface, we seemed to be the model family, and sometimes we were. However, there were other times when my husband's mood and behavior was very unpredictable, with highs and lows, even abusive at times. Early on, it was physical, but emotional and verbal abuse existed off and on throughout our marriage and even extended to both of our girls. On Super Bowl Sunday, 2013, he was returning from a trip I thought was an interview and a visit with some former co-workers. I decided to surprise him and went inside the airport to greet him. While waiting on his flight to arrive, I was eating a bowl of soup, and it wasn't anything that I've ever really experienced, but God started whispering to me. He said, "Boy, he hasn't called you very much this week, has he?" And I thought, that was a weird thought. Next, God whispered, "And she hasn't been on Facebook at all this week, huh?" Then God continued and said, "You need to check his Sprint call log." I had only discovered there was a Sprint call log a few days earlier, but I didn't click on it. But I did click on it that day, and I saw her phone number repeatedly. The airport started spinning, and I was having my first panic attack. As I sat there, God whispered again and said, "This is going to be the hardest thing you will ever face, but I will be with you. I want you to write a book about how I was with you during this journey. Other people will need to hear how I delivered you from this." About 5 minutes later, he walked through security. I confronted him, he confessed, and our 33-year marriage crumbled. It all happened in a matter of about 10 minutes with no warning at all.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, well, I had a very similar story, which at the time, I was in the midst of just chaos, and I had no idea if I was hearing from God or not. But one of the trips my ex-husband snuck out on, that he was going to San Diego at the same time that she was going to this orphanage with his mistress. And I worked at Southwest Airlines at the time, and he had been gone for a while, and he said that he was going to San Diego at the same time that she was going to this orphanage. And I just knew, he just kept lying that he wasn't having this affair with one of his cult members. And I was sitting at work, and you could pull up somebody's name and search who used your buddy passes. And I felt like before I clicked enter, that God spoke to me and said, "This is the moment where you know you're going to be getting a divorce." And I thought, how could that be God? And I clicked it, and he had given her one of my buddy passes to travel to San Diego so they could go on their little trip together, have their little affair, and he could continue to commit adultery on me. So
I told you she was going to an orphanage?
Yeah, he said that she was going to work in an orphanage.
Sounds a little more wholesome, doesn't it?
To have his other cult members pray about whether they should lie to me or not about it. And God spoke to me the entire time about this affair, even when, like, I would work 16 hours and I would come home from work, and I felt like God would say, "He's staying at this hotel, this certain hotel with her right now." Like, and there's all kinds of casinos all over. I'd call the one casino and say, "Can I be transferred to my ex-husband's room?" And they would transfer me right over. And so one time after work, I went down to the hotel and I didn't see them anywhere. And I thought, Lord, why would I drive? This is so out of my character. Why would I drive 30 miles for no reason? And I turn around and she's in the hallway And that's a whole nother story. But yeah, anyway, yeah, I kind of had God would just show me things. The whole point was God would show me things. And I felt I wasn't even the closest as I am to God right now, but he was still there and he was still showing me things. And so that's interesting that your story took 10 minutes. Mine took a longer, but
Well, now looking back, I could see there were signs, but I was oblivious to it,
And we talk about that. That's where we're going to go through betrayal trauma, because you do become oblivious when you're that close to someone. So we're going to discuss a little bit about what betrayal trauma is. It's not the exact same thing as adultery. That's one aspect of that. Betrayal trauma, from all the research that I've done, is one of the most painful forms of abuse. And I took this information from a website called choosetherapy.com. The author of it was a licensed mental health and trauma therapist named Rachel Larson. So, betrayal trauma refers to the pain and emotional distress when a trusted institution, loved one, or intimate partner violates someone's trust. The betrayal trauma theory was from Jennifer Fry. She's the developer of betrayal trauma theory, and she describes betrayal trauma as the trauma that results from betrayal by a trusted person or institution. The betrayal trauma theory seeks to understand how an individual will interpret that betrayal and store it in his or her memory. This theory predicts that the more necessary a person or institution is deemed to be in the person's life, the more likely there is to be an unawareness or blindness to that betrayal, which is what we just talked about.
Yes.
Third-party observers are often left wondering, how can they not see what is happening? In order to cope, the mind of the survivor blocks out the painful information so that it can focus on the more basic needs of survival and attachment. This is called betrayal blindness. I definitely have betrayal blindness. But he was also lying to me and my children, all of us. This can explain why a child can have what appears to be a good, healthy relationship with a trusted caregiver who is secretly abusing them, or why someone stays in an abusive relationship and makes excuses for their partner. So, Carol, how did you deal with the pain, and how long would you say it took for you to recover and begin to heal?
Well, it's interesting you bring up the betrayal trauma, because I certainly felt that with my ex-husband. But then also the other woman was a dear friend of ours of 20 years. She babysat our children. We were just very involved with their family, and we were at each other's houses all the time and very close. So that seems to be very deep, and then also like a two-edged sword almost.
Yeah.
And then one thing, I would be talking to God, and I would talk to him about how I just felt this betrayal and everything. And he whispered to me, yes, I understand, but, my son was betrayed, and I'm with you.
Wow.
So that happened quite often. He would speak to me in ways like that, and I would be trying to tell him how I was feeling, which he wants to hear how we feel. But he would always answer. The answer always was, well, my son was tempted. My son was betrayed. My son was hated. And
so you had a compassionate God talking to you.
Yes, absolutely.
So betrayal trauma may occur alongside things like gaslighting. There are many different types of betrayal trauma, including there's 4 different types. Parental, when a parent or caretaker, someone you depend on for your needs to be met, abuses you or fails to protect you from harm. Intimate partner, when the person doing the betraying is your intimate partner. This can take place when your partner is having an emotional affair or a physical affair. If one of the partners has an active sexual addiction, there's often betrayal present. And then institutional, when an institution impacts you in a way that is in direct opposition to what they portray themselves to be or their stated mottos and goals. This can also occur when the institution protects the perpetrator instead of supporting the victim or whistleblower. This may include an educational institution, the military, healthcare systems, etc.
And maybe the church?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That should definitely be listed, especially...
I was reading that and went... maybe the church too.
Especially lately, what you hear going on.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is interpersonal, when a trusted friend, peer, or individual betrays your trust.
Wow, that's interesting. So I never really thought about being betrayed by his mistress because I treated her like family. She was like a daughter to me, and the whole entire time betraying me. So it wasn't just one betrayal that I needed healing from, but also the betrayal from her as well. Yeah. And there's other things going on now that still hurt me that have to do with her because they're still together. So it's an ongoing process. What about you, Carol?
Yes, I feel exactly the same way. The one good thing that has happened recently, how the Lord has brought things full circle, is the Lord was working on me on forgiveness for the last few years. I kept thinking I was going to be able to forgive in my own strength, but he showed me there's no way I'm able to do that in my own strength. And it was a process. So a couple of years ago on Mother's Day of 2019, the Lord spoke to me during a sermon and said, you need to start on the path to forgiveness. And my initial thought was, no, I don't want to. So he had been working on me for a couple of years. And then the reason I bring that up is this past weekend, actually, our granddaughter, who was 9 years old, was baptized down in Tucson. And she asked if it would hurt her Mimi's heart too much if she invited her grandpa.
Yeah.
So I said, of course not. Mimi will be fine. So after 9 years of not seeing my ex-husband, we were able to be at the baptism together and had dinner.
How was that for you? Like what? How was? Because I remember we prayed for that. So
yes, I was quite anxious ahead of time, but I had so many people praying that it was just peaceful.
Wow,
it really was, and I
just a God thing.
Thank the Lord.
So you hadn't talked to him at all in 9 years?
Nope,
not once. See, I got forced to see mine when they got in that car accident. So that broke the ice, but I'm still not ready for that. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Well, that was a lot of years too, though.
Yeah. I might need about 9 more.
Yeah.
That's I know I shouldn't say that, but it's true. I
wouldn't have said that 9 years ago. I would never pictured being in the same room.
I might need 40 more years.
That's amazing,
Yeah, so that is interesting. And the institutional one, I also find that interesting as well. That, you can have betrayal trauma for all those reasons. Now, some of the signs and symptoms that you may be suffering from betrayal trauma may include, and here we go with this word, alexithymia, being unable or find it very difficult to recognize your own emotions and describe them. I definitely struggle with that still regarding the betrayal. Very pushback emotion on that part. Physical symptoms. Talks about in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. Bessel van der Kolk expounds upon the ideas that the body stores everything and how trauma can have significant physiological impacts on the brain and body. While the mind can blind us to the pain and betrayal, the body does remember. This can manifest in headaches, stomach aches, chronic fatigue, obesity, gastrointestinal issues, sleep issues, laryngitis, a weakened immune system, and so on. The next thing is increased dissociation, the feeling of being in a fog or zoned out, vaguely aware of your emotions and feelings, but not really being able to clearly grasp them. Definitely struggled with that. Anxiety, this can either manifest as generalized anxiety or specific fears related to the betrayal. And depression. When you're unable to recognize or express your emotions, depression becomes more likely. So I definitely fall on the more of the depression side with all the abuse that I've gone through. The physical symptom, that book is definitely super interesting. And knowing that, did you just have those reactions even without thinking about that? Betrayal trauma, like all trauma, can have long-term damaging effects on both your psychological and physical health. The mind often has created a dissociation to deal with the painful betrayal. This is meant to be a temporary strategy to help you cope through the event until you have the strength and resources to face your pain and heal it. Without proper treatment, the damaging effects may deepen and escalate.
So, Carol, when you look back now, what are some specific things that you did to heal?
Well, I attribute all my healing to the Lord.
Yeah.
One way God provided healing was that He used people throughout my journey, especially my family and friends, to help me heal. I'm so grateful that God was so faithful to His promise that day at the airport. He surely was right beside me. My family surrounded me with love and support. For instance, my sister flew in from Indiana and stayed with me for 2 months. She actually slept in the same bed with me, so when I woke up crying, she was there.
Oh,
that's great.
Wow.
I know. It's just blessed my heart. It still blesses my heart. And then my brother's family also came out to help me move. And then my brother, he is the king encourager. He sent me encouraging verses and songs on Facebook for a whole year.
Oh, wow.
So now, even this many years later, they pop up, and I receive extra special blessings again and again.
Wow.
Because those are the things that he sent me that encouraged me so much.
Wow.
And then he
That's
had
song special too, because to me, songs
yeah.
really can minister to you sometimes. They're just like, it's in the Bible. Music is
yes, absolutely.
one of those things that speaks to your soul.
It sure did. It sure did. There's many songs that I saved on a playlist, and I still listen to that playlist, and I remember those feelings of barely able to get out of bed, and but then you get you take a shower, you listen to the music, and then so a lot of things come back up. It's right now during this part of my journey, it's more of just a gratitude and a thankfulness that God has been with me just like He said He would. And then one other way God provided healing was I visited a church on Easter Sunday of that year of 2013, and I was so very broken. I just kind of excused myself and went out to the foyer, and I happened to meet a very special new friend. Her name is Yemi, and she sensed my despair. She asked if she could pray with me, and I'm so thankful that she did. I briefly told her my story, and boy, did she pray.
Wow.
She is a strong woman of prayer, and it felt like she prayed fire down from heaven that day.
I had a spiritual prayer warrior as well. I still have one. She just messaged me yesterday. What's going on? How's your mom? How are your kids? I've been praying. I'm praying. And
isn't it wonderful?
Oh, she would sit there and pray with me for 4 or 5 hours while, like, when I told her about the affair and how I just confronted him at the hotel, and I immediately call her and literally just pray for hours, just because I didn't even know what was going on. I couldn't even believe that this was happening in my life. Like, It didn't seem real.
And you don't even know what to pray.
Yeah.
And you can't pray yourself. But I mean, God prays Jesus prays for us.
Yeah.
But in this case,
having somebody else.
Yes,
pray with
absolutely.
It was such a blessing to have that person.
And I still get to
life.
see her every Sunday, and I give her lots of hugs.
That's
But the really neat thing about that was when she finished praying that day, I asked her if the church had any women's counselors, because I was in need of one, obviously. Mm-hmm. She smiled, and she said, actually, I've been a women's abuse counselor for over 20 years.
Oh, my goodness.
So God brought you to the right person.
Wow.
Oh, my word.
Oh, my goodness.
I was just in awe and just bawling and just so thankful. It was just another step that he truly was holding my right hand.
Guiding you.
And this trauma that you experience is supposedly one of the most painful. So God just was there for you every step of the way.
He sure was.
Wow.
So we started counseling. She walked with me through in-person meetings, sent scripture, many hours of prayer over the phone, in person. And she's just my most dear friend to this day. And I just thank God for her.
Yeah.
But God continued to place people in my life, and it was so very clear that it was His providence. There's no other explanation.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. That's not a coincidence.
Yes.
No.
There's nothing
It's a God
like
thing.
that. Right. And the other thing I thought was that I'm so thankful that these people obeyed God's call to reach out to me.
Right.
Because if He was tugging at their heart and they didn't obey Him, that would be miss a blessing. So.
Wow.
And there were many sad days, but as time went on, there were more and more thankful days as I reflected on the goodness of God. Other important ways that I found was to write down things that you're going through, feelings, prayers, praises. I use a prayer app that enables me to see a list of how God has answered prayers. Mm-hmm. And then also to get plugged into a Bible-believing church where you can begin to serve, begin to volunteer, teach, sing, encourage others. Then also, more personally, join a small group at a church where people come alongside each other with accountability to point others to Scripture and pray and encourage each other.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
We also do have a list of ways that you can heal outside of that as well, and we'd like to go over those. So...
Number 1 is practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is about helping us to be more aware of the moment as experienced in our bodies, acknowledging whatever we notice with compassion towards yourself and no judgment about anything you notice. It's not about clearing your mind. It's about noticing what's happening in your mind without trying to change it.
Yeah, and we talk about that on the Brain podcast.
Yeah.
Mindfulness, it's very important.
Right, for our brains especially.
It is. I mean, I love it. And number 2 is to take care of your body. So taking care of your body means giving it the nutrition and the care that it needs. So basic things like eating clean meals, plenty of veggies. But also that you add in exercise as well. The body and the mind are connected. So while we're taking care of our physical health, it may seem unrelated, it is an essential part of laying the foundation for a healthy mind as well. It has the added benefit of sending yourself a message that you are someone for whom it's worth making that effort. And I do like that. Now also you need to practice good sleeping habits. And they give a few suggestions here, which I really like. Make sure you go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. Keep your room dark and cool and abstain from screen time and blue lights at least an hour before bed.
And number 3, get a physical. If you've experienced sexual betrayal, this becomes even more of a necessity. When infidelity or sex addiction is disclosed or discovered, it is very rare that all the details and facts are disclosed. The offending partner is often not completely honest. It may be uncomfortable to think about the possibility of having an STD or STI when you've been monogamous with your partner.
Yeah, and I thought this one was definitely important to leave in because after my ex had committed adultery, I mean, there were some suspicions that maybe he had before that as well, but my kids were extremely concerned about me getting checked and getting everything tested and getting this physical for everything, for STDs, for everything, just to make sure that your health is good after you find out that you have a cheating partner. The next one is Pamper Yourself. So go get a massage or a manicure or try the various forms of body work such as reflexology, chiropractic, postural integration, and you're also building on your foundation of long-term physical and mental health.
5, try a variety of calming activities. Mindful exercises and activities such as martial arts, yoga, Pilates can be helpful to calm our nervous system and deepen our connection with our bodies. I'm definitely a big fan of yoga.
Yeah.
I try to do it every night before I go to bed, and that definitely helps me get... I'm type A personality, so I need to unwind and just get relaxed and breathe deep and all of that.
You know what I love too is I've learned to incorporate all these activities and make it also spiritual.
Yeah.
Like when I go for a run, sometimes I just stop and listen to the Lord and I will sit down and I will pray and I will meditate and I will practice mindfulness and I meditate on scripture and God's word. I'll practice mindfulness, all these things. Whatever I'm doing, even if I'm just stretching, I'm usually praying at the same time. So they're all spiritual things, but they all bring healing because it's healing your mind and body as well. So also, this is a really, really important one as well. Number 6 is to build healthy relationships. No relationship is perfect and people we love will let us down. And in a safe relationship, you'll feel free to be yourself and not feel judged. If mistakes are made or feelings are hurt, you and the other person can talk about it. When you walk away from the conversation, you'll feel heard and understood and good about yourself overall. Make sure that at least the 5 closest relationships in your life are healthy, safe, and supportive. If you have no such relationships in your life and don't know how to create healthy relationships with someone, you may need to add this to your goals as you work with a therapist. So I'd really like that.
Number 7, set firm boundaries. Setting good boundaries is not the same as setting limits. It can be very confusing when you're first learning about boundaries. Boundaries are what I'm going to do to protect myself when a disrespectful event is taking place.
Yeah, and I definitely struggle with boundaries because I just had to do whatever he said. So then you lose that. You don't even...
Oh, I had that boundaries book. I had every boundaries book. Boundaries in marriage.
I have all too.
I have them all highlighted and underlined.
Yeah, well, he didn't know what boundaries were. So that's a new thing for me, but I do understand them now, thank goodness.
They're threatened by him because they don't like it.
Yeah.
Of course, boundaries are not what they like.
And number 8 is tell your story. I love this one. When we tell our story to others, we're often telling it to ourselves. This can happen in a safe and nurturing environment, such as with a trusted friend or a therapist with whom you've established a trusting relationship with. The ability to become vulnerable is important. If you learn to do it with safe, supportive people, the potential for healing is magnified. So that's why they talk about vulnerability and healing. It's all combined because it magnifies your healing. Mm-hmm. Journaling is also a great opportunity to share your story without any negative feedback from others. That is true. No one's going to say anything.
Right.
But what's also great about journaling is like Carol talked about, it helps you get your emotions out. Mm-hmm. Like you won't even, sometimes you don't know what emotions you're feeling, but if you start journaling, it helps you express those emotions. Did you have anything to add to that, Carol?
Yes. One thing that does come to mind is there was a period of time when I wasn't up to journaling. I kept having it in the back of my mind, and I was just so depressed and so down that I didn't journal. And so then Satan got a hold of me and said, "You have failed God because you haven't journaled every day, and there's no way you're going to remember all the things that need to go into a book about how the Lord's delivered you." But come to find out, with this age of technology, there's all kinds of things that were saved on Facebook and different apps and different things where God had the last laugh. So I'm just so grateful, and that burden was lifted off my heart last year when the Lord showed me that He did help me to remember things. There were ways to remember things, but then He also helped my memory to remember certain circumstances and things that had happened. Right. So it's all going to be fine. It's all going to be giving glory to God.
Yeah, well, I notice right now I'm forgetting things too, and I think it's because I'm healing. So I'm not looking at it as a bad way. I'm
Right.
going, oh, this just doesn't bother me anymore. So maybe I will remember the memory, but I'll remember it in a different way where it's not
True.
so traumatizing to me.
Very
So
true.
I think that might be what's happening.
Very true. One other thing I wanted to add too is what I learned to do, and it took me a while, but I learned to do if throughout the day, if I felt anxiety or anything that kind of came up, I would just get by myself and spend, even if it's 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, is as I feel anxiety, I would just kind of steal away and spend some time in prayer, even if it's like 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, spend some time in prayer, listen to some songs.
Yeah.
And then also there's a Bible app, I think it's called YouVersion, that I use, and that you can read different devotions.
Yeah, I have the U version.
Right. So you
Plus
can.
Bible Gateway, I don't know, they have an audio.
Yeah.
I've been going to bed listening to the Bible,
Yes.
and it's like so amazing because I listen to it in the Message version. So
Yeah.
it's so neat because then you'll fall asleep and you'll wake back up and you're like, oh, wow, that's so good.
Absolutely.
Different things.
I do a lot of that. I learn by listening and reading.
Yeah, me too.
But especially the listening things. So that has been helpful. And just a tip for somebody who's going through a difficult time is it doesn't have to be an hour worth of
Right.
devotion time or anything. It could just be a few minutes, and it could be 3 or 4 times a day, depending on
Right.
what your schedule is
Yeah,
like.
that's
And
weird.
it does
'cause,
help.
yeah. I was praying about that today, and I just felt like sometimes when you think that you have to do those certain things, it creates a legalism.
Right.
And so I feel like people that were abused, people that have been through trauma, like myself, when my brain wasn't working, God was not upset with me
No.
when I could only spend 5 minutes and still not focus, or when I spent 3 hours and could barely focus.
Right.
So that right there, that needs to be broken off. God sees our heart.
He sure
He
does.
sees our heart. He sees our intentions, and he looks at the inside. And I think we just put way too much pressure on ourselves. And I developed that from going to church for all those years as well. I think it became very legalistic. Oh, I'm not doing and studying and doing and reading the Bible 15, times a day or a year or whatever, like everyone else is doing. So I must just not even be worthy. But that's not how God looks at us at all.
No, he loves us so much.
That needs to be broken off because
Yeah.
he loves us no matter what. And I had a year and a
Absolutely.
half where I struggled with even functioning. And when you're abused badly, and I know many people that were, they can barely function. He sees our hearts, and that's
Absolutely.
basically all it
Well,
is.
I'm going through Galatians the second time, and talk about a book that frees you from legalism. Galatians. It's such a freeing book. I mean, it says right in there, he said it's free for freedom. He doesn't, we put that, and he talks about, the author talks about there, we do as a church, we start putting it back on because we get saved, and then you're like, okay, but I got to do all this. And I mean, it's just, and I think it's our human nature too, but
Or a
We
small
put all
group-
these rules on everything. We put
Yeah.
all these rules on everything, and they aren't in the Bible.
No.
And the example to look at is Jesus' example. And he spent his time with tax collectors, sinners,
Yep.
and he had such a good balance and was just able to live in that setting, and people would just be drawn to him and see that light, and they just
Right.
followed him. They just followed him. Yeah, so
yeah. So number 9, find your passion or rediscover an old one. What do you enjoy doing simply because you enjoy doing it? Make a list. Think of the things you used to enjoy doing as a child. What are creative or artistic activities that the tiniest part of you might like to try? As you make your list, try to avoid screen time activities such as TV shows, social media, video games, and instead focus on creative activities like writing, drawing, or playing an instrument. Set aside 2 to 3 hours a week or try some of the activities on your list.
And number 10 is commit to your own personal growth. So once you've begun to heal, you'll also begin experiencing new growth in your life as you begin practicing these new skills. This growth can continue indefinitely, as long as you would like, and it's called post-traumatic growth. It's a term that describes the growth that occurs in response to one's trauma. It doesn't happen automatically. It's not that microwavable, what we were talking
Yeah.
about, but it takes commitment. And just make this investment in yourself.
Yeah, and then it's important to find a trauma-trained therapist. A good therapist will help you find balance and learn how to help yourself first so that you can continue to support the people you care about in your life.
So, Carol, can you tell us about some of the amazing things God's doing in your life now to encourage our listeners, and once again, myself, to give us hope and healing after adultery or infidelity?
Sure, I'd be glad to. One thing that is one of my favorite examples of God's restoration is, as you may remember, Super Bowl Sunday 2013 was the day that our marriage crumbled. Well, fast forward to 2015, in God's providence, He was restoring me and blessed me with my new husband. And on Super Bowl Sunday of 2018, my new husband had rededicated his life to God and was baptized. So that was 5 years exactly.
Wow.
And
That's amazing.
I love that part of the story because I'm so grateful to God. And he knew that was the timing of that was going to happen,
Yeah.
Like, the church scheduled the baptism without any regard to any of us.
Right. Wow.
But God just kind of did an extra blessing there.
He definitely uses dates and things like that to speak to us to bring confirmation.
Absolutely. And then during the difficult times of spring of 2020, God spoke to me and said it was time to begin a new ministry of encouragement. And I'm calling it Eagle's Wings 2020 to share the joy, peace, and renewed strength that he has placed in my life. God uses times of tribulation to show people how he's glorified through the lives of others. He is using this provision in my life to create a hub of encouragement through Eagle's Wings 2020. It is a ministry of encouragement and exists to spread the light of God's love to others in a gospel-centered community. Our 4 mission pillars are outlined in our ministry model: to share testimonies of God's faithfulness in our lives, to serve through outreach initiatives. One is a postcard project, one is a pen pal project, one is a phone call project. The third pillar is to pray with us through our virtual community. And then the fourth is to gather with us in person and praise him for the results. And then actually last week, we just did our first in-person celebration at an assisted living home here in Gilbert. And it was a sweet time of fellowship as we experienced our core 4 pillars. We gathered, we shared testimonies, we worshiped in song, and we prayed with individuals there in
that's
the...
great.
That's amazing.
There were 8.
Can you go to my
Congratulations.
sister's assisted living in Indiana?
So that's what you mostly do, is help assisted, or just anybody that needs encouragement. How does this work?
Yes, anybody who needs encouragement. But that last week there were 8 people there, and they seem to really enjoy it. We're going to be doing that once a month.
Oh,
great.
Oh, wow.
And so we're going around to different facilities, introducing ourselves and signing up to go and encourage their residents.
So,
Oh, boy.
make sure you let us know what your website is and all that on
Yes.
the podcast.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just got really excited.
No, that's great. That's great. And we need volunteers. We need people to encourage.
Okay.
Because God has given us the model and the ministry, but then we need to backfill it with people to encourage. So, and this could be anybody from who's just lonely in a different state, or the one thing we're hoping to do is maybe have a pen pal project with the different assisted living folks. Say, for instance, assisted living folks in Gilbert might be pen pals with assisted living folks in Vermont.
Okay.
Or,
Yeah.
be pen pals or
that's
encourage
a great
each
idea.
other.
My sister
So-
would love that. She lives in Indiana. So
How's your
That is
sister?
great.
Your sister's in a
she's in
home.
assisted living.
Oh,
now.
she is?
Yeah. And she likes to
Absolutely.
write. I mean, she's a writer, so
I
she would
would-
love to do that.
We would love to
Yeah.
be part of
Okay,
her,
you guys connected.
Okay.
her journey. We have 14, so far we have 14 volunteers, but we need to have a lot more volunteers.
So you
to-
need volunteers to encourage, and you also need people to encourage?
Yes, absolutely.
And there's definitely a need for that in this day and age.
Absolutely.
People need
And you can always encourage me if you don't have anyone else to encourage. I'm kidding. I'm joking. But yes, do you have on your website a volunteer form or a thing they can fill out, or what do they do if they'd like to do any of that?
I do. If you go to eagleswings2020.com, there's different ways to get involved. You can click the Share Testimony tab to type out what the Lord's done in your life, and then that will be shared with our other readers. And then also you could click the Serve tab to join us in one of these outreach projects.
Okay.
And also you could click on the Pray tab to request prayer or to join our virtual prayer team.
Oh, that's great.
And then there's also the Donate tab to contribute, which would help us to continue to develop these programs where we go in once a month to the
Right.
residential facilities.
Okay. Well, that's
great.
awesome.
These are all great.
Yeah.
Great things.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we just wanted to thank you for being on our podcast. And you already shared a little bit about where we can find you and what you can do. So definitely go to her podcast, or sorry, go to her website and sign up for one of those things.
And are you on social media as well, or do you just prefer they go to your website?
I am on Facebook at Eagles Wings 2020.
Yeah, and you're on Instagram, but you made a new account and never followed me.
Exactly.
I was like, does she not like us? What's going on?
You went for your nonprofit.
I'm so
I don't know.
I don't understand it. I literally need help. with that
I can help
kind of
you with
thing.
the Instagram stuff. That's about the.
And then I have
Twitter. We can't help you with.
a YouTube channel with a few little videos, but boy, do I need help with social media. for
Okay.
sure.
Well, then the website should work for now. But yes, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. And Carol is a friend of ours as well. We have a group that we all get together and pray. There's about
Very special group.
18 new nonprofits in it now. So everybody needs help volunteering in these.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yes.
And
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful to God that in 2013, he told me what he was going to do as far as being with me every step of the way and sharing my story. And so this is full circle. This many years later, sitting here tonight with the podcast.
Oh, awesome. We get to be part of your full circle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sharing my story. So
That's
I'm just
great.
so thankful to you guys.
well, and it is a brave thing to do. It makes you vulnerable, but now you'll find more healing, and
Absolutely.
you'll also bring healing to our listeners. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story.
And then pray over Karen's stomach. Aren't you supposed to pray that over Karen's stomach? Do that real quick over Karen's stomach noise.
Lord Jesus, heal. Heal that intestinal issues.
I know. I was looking at that. I'm like, hey, maybe I have gastrointestinal issues.
As long as we don't penetrate.
Now I can't believe I was.
I wanted to cry.
What are you thinking about, Karen?
This can occur when the institution protects the perpetrator. This can occur. Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.